Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are we feeling today? Woo, perfect. Okay, we're going to get started right now. But if you haven't gotten an interpretation device, please go to the table right there and grab your device. We're going to get started. We'll start off with a short video and then we'll begin. So thanks, everyone.
Um forte acordo entre duas ou mais pessoas é um pacto. O ato é feito em caminhar em uma direção comum com uma ou mais pessoas é união. Uma iniciativa de apoio a organizações lideradas por mulheres e pessoas trans negras que atuam no enfrentamento ao racismo é aliança. Nós somos o programa Aliança Negra. Somos muitas, somos diversas, somos a maioria desse país. Somos mulheres negras. Somos Luísa, Maria, Ângela, Mariela e Valdeci. Somos Filipa, Sueli, Nayara, Sônia. Somos Antônia, Lélia, Cintia e Beatriz. A gente não pode de maneira nenhuma esquecer que na América Latina e no Caribe, a grande
cannot forget that in
brancas
Latin America,
têm uma forma muito especial de inserção na sociedade determinada por esta condição. Trazemos conosco a marca da libertação. Nosso lema deve ser Organização Já. Quando a mulher negra se movimenta, toda a estrutura da sociedade se movimenta com ela. Muitas conquistas foram alcançadas. Estes resultados impactaram a política pública. Em 1988, o racismo se torna crime pela Constituição. E em mais um avanço na legislação, em 2023, entrou em vigor a lei que criminaliza também a injúria racial. 2003, obrigatoriedade do ensino da história africana e afro-brasileira nas escolas. 2010, aprovação do Estatuto da Igualdade Racial. 2012, política de cotas no ensino superior. 2015, marcha com mais de 50 mil mulheres negras em Brasília pelo bem viver. Os nossos passos vêm de longe. Conquistamos e iremos conquistar ainda mais. O programa Aliança Negra pelo Fim da Violência é uma realização do Elas Mais, Doar para Transformar, em parceria com a Fundação Ford e o apoio do Instituto Unibanco. É uma iniciativa de apoio ao avanço da equidade racial através de investimento direto na mão de lideranças do movimento social e dos movimentos negros, em especial das mulheres negras que promovem a equidade nas conquistas e acessos. Entre os anos de 2021 e 2022, foram apoiadas 94 organizações lideradas por mulheres negras. A meta do Aliança Negra para 2023 é ampliar o apoio e alcançar mais instituições, promovendo oficinas de capacitação, espaços de articulação política e intercâmbios. Que possamos contribuir cada vez mais para que a população negra possa exercer o direito à vida. E você, vem com a gente? Vamos colocar o antirracismo em prática? Doe para transformar. Conheça o Aliança Negra pelo Fim da Violência. Saiba mais em www.aliançanegra.org. Um forte acordo.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the
Olá a
People's
todos
Forum.
e
If you haven't been
bem-vindos ao
here
People's
before, we're a space for
Forum.
popular political
Aqueles que
education
não
and cultural
conhecem
work.
esse espaço,
Um,
nós
we have a
estamos
lot of-
dedicados à educação.
It's on channel 1.
Se vocês não pegaram ainda o aparelhinho de tradução, peço que peguem ali na frente, canal 1. Se precisarem de ajuda, a Thalita apoia ali também.
For Portuguese, it's channel 1.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear the Portuguese? The English?
Give us a few seconds
here
of
it
figuring
should
out
be
time.
English.
Channel 1, yeah.
Okay, should I switch to channel 2 for English?
No, that's good. Just leave it here.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear?
Okay, is there still an echo? We are doing some testing.
I hear something on channel 1.
Okay, so we're good.
Adjust your volume. Podem aumentar o volume.
Uh, Okay, okay. Portuguese 1, Português 1. Everything is channel 1.
Everything's channel one?
Yes. Está ligado? Ah, é por isso. Não. Não.
All good to go? Perfect. All right. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Let's try it again. Welcome to the People's Forum. We are a space for popular political education and cultural work. My name is Saidi, and I'm the education coordinator here at the People's Forum. Thank you. I'm extremely honored to be here to moderate today's panel, Black Women Alliance, All Fighting Against Violence. And I'm even more honored to be joined by our Brazilian comrades, who are comrades from over 16 amazing revolutionary organizations who are leading social change in Brazil now, who are coming together to fight against violence against women, violence against LGBTQIA folks, violence against the violence of poverty and of hunger. All of these women are on the front line of these struggles. And the front of the marches, leading the social change. And even as we're on the second day of June, a month which is, for many of us, we celebrate pride and how far we've come in the fight for full gay and queer liberation, in honor of how far we've come and how much farther we have to go, but all the struggle that has been put into this celebration, and especially to celebrate with our comrades who are doing this work in Brazil as well. And as a space, as a People's Forum, at which international working class internationalism is at the center of the work that we do, we're even more honored to have you here today. So thank you to our comrades from Brazil. Thank you to everyone for joining us here today. Thank you to our comrades from DDB for putting this together and all of your hard work. So before we get started, I'm gonna do a quick run over of some logistics. So this is a hybrid event, so we have folks in person and online that are joining us today. So if you have a question for folks online, just type it in the chat and we'll try and raise it during the Q&A sessions. And if you're in person, just raise your hand and I can bring you the mic so that our folks online can hear your question. Additionally, this event is held in both Portuguese and English. So if you need interpretation, please grab your device at the front table. It'd be great to get set up now so that you're not lost in the middle of the event. And lastly, I'll be moderating the event, so please keep an ear out for my voice. So if we have a break, I'll bring you back from the break. I'll announce all of that, so just get used to my voice. This is gonna be really amazing. We have an amazing panel, we have amazing leaders, and I'm very excited for this event. There'll be time for Q&A at the end of each panel. So there's 3 panels today, and they're all very different and all really amazing. So I encourage you to stay for all of them. And if you have any questions, think of them throughout the panel. And towards the end of it, we'll have time for Q&A. So just save them, write them down. And yeah, so because we have a very stacked program, please be concise with your questions so that we could have time for everyone to hear everyone and to talk with everyone. Sound good? Tudo bem? Tudo bem. All right, wonderful. I'm going to pass it over to Miriam and Natalia.
Boa noite, gente. Bem-vindos à nossa
house. Welcome to our house of fighting and for anti-fascist and anti-capitalist fighting and anti-racist fighting and feminist fighting and fighting for popular movements. And in my name and in the name of Defend Democracy in Brazil, and in the name of all the people that are part of this community and that are part of the People's Forum community, we want to welcome everybody and welcome this huge delegation of women who are leaders and to all the women, everyone who is here present to hear what they have to say and what they have to talk about the struggle in Brazil and this dossier that they brought to the forum in the UN and to other organizations and what they're going to take to Washington next week. My last thing that I wanted to say is that here we have a group of Black women who are activists, but also women that are veterans that worked since the 80s against dictatorship in Brazil, women who are young, who are trans women and LGBTQIA women from the north of Brazil, from the south of Brazil, and they're here rewriting the story of Brazil with their struggles, with their research, with their contributions to the movement against racism and against racism in Brazil and for the bom viver of women in Brazil. I want to welcome everybody. This is going to be a great night, and I will pass it over to Natalia Campos.
First leader, my boss.
A Miriam é minha Estamos muito felizes de ter todo mundo aqui. Muito obrigada por estarem aqui. É uma honra. It's an honor to have everyone here. And from the Fundo Elas, we also wanted to thank everybody from the Fundo Elas that's in Brazil, that's watching us and that's giving us support and giving us communication support. And Iracema that's here with the delegation, and she's going to speak right after us. And everyone who's here that's our present, all of my Portuguese students who are here at the People's Forum. And I also wanted to thank all the staff here at the People's Forum. And she's naming all the staff that she wants to thank. And I want to thank everyone who has helped this event happen and all the GDB staff who's helped this happen. And I also wanted to thank and call the co-director of the People's Forum to come up, and Manolo, one of the biggest supporters of movements in Brazil. I want to welcome Manolo. Welcome all of our comrades. É uma honra ter todo mundo aqui e
From Brazil. We owe you so much. We owe you our existence in this city right now. We have been inspired for so long in our struggles against capitalism, but also for the world that we want by the struggles that the women in Brazil lead. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We also appreciate so much that you have taken time away from your busy meetings at the United Nations. We know that has not been an easy week. It's been a week of a lot of difficult meetings. We know we have an unfinished agenda. The world doesn't owe us millions, they owe us trillions. And it's not just about reparations, but it's about the world that we actually want to build. And again, the Black women's movement in Brazil have been at the vanguard of that struggle for the planet and for humanity. We are all so excited to have you here. We hope that this is only the beginning of many more conversations, of many friendships, of a new camaraderie that actively puts all the peoples of the planet in the same direction, in the same fight for the future that we need. We wish you the most success in these panels tonight, but also success in what you go on to do in Washington, D.C. next, success in the continued fight, and know that you have our undying support and love as you go on. Thank you so much for being here. It's so good to see so many wonderful faces that we remember from other activities and events. And the fight is long, but the fight is ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Manolo. And I would like to call on Savana, do Fundo Elas, para falar.
Boa tarde, todas, todos.
Everyone, how pleasant is it to arrive at a place that we are unfamiliar with, and we look around and we see these people. That's very comforting for us. We arrived here with a lot of energy. We saw a lot of dialogue, but this space is very welcoming, and I would like to recognize that. I would like to thank Natalia and Miriam and our organization, Defender Democracy in Brazil. And I'm representing the board of Elas Mais. It's an honor to represent them. And we are very proud, and we really recognize this initiative. We need resources to fund the struggles of the leaders, the Black leaders and trans people and other identities in Brazil. So we say that our comrades are in the front line, but we need to have resources for this alliance to thrive. We comprise of 16 organizations, and we are expanding our efforts worldwide, and we want to open the dialogue. And there's a lot of things that are happening that are incredible and give us a lot of inspiration. Thank you for creating this space. Thank you. Para trocar temos que fazer isso para não dar
first panel. Who's excited? Woo! Perfect. All right, now I'm going to welcome Margaret Kimberly, who will be the moderator for today's event, today's first panel. Welcome to the stage. So Margaret Kimberly is the executive editor of Black Agenda Report and the host of the Black Agenda Radio podcast. She's the author of the book, Prejudicial, Black America and the Presidents. In addition to being a coordinating committee member of Black Alliance for Peace, she's an administrative committee member of the United National Anti-War Coalition and the board of directors of the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation. Ms. Kimberly is a recipient of the Serena Shim Award for Uncompromising Journalism and a board member of Consortium News. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you so much for moderating our first panel, which is Actions to End Violence Against Brazil's Black Population.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Saidi. It's such a pleasure to be at People's Forum again. I've been here twice this week. Sometimes I go through these periods of time where I'm always at People's Forum, but where else would we be, right? In order to talk about topics such as this, fighting against violence in Brazil or elsewhere. And of course, I want to thank Natalia Campos and Miriam Marquez for inviting me to join as a moderator of these discussions. We were connected by a mutual friend and comrade, and we had Vanya Santana, who is here. She was a guest on Black Agenda Radio, our podcast last week, and it's such a pleasure to meet her here. She was so gracious to join us on our podcast. And so all that to say, I was very happy to be here tonight. You know, as a Black person, an African person, a new African, as some would say, and a Pan-Africanist, I'm always very happy to be in solidarity with other Black people in this hemisphere, to learn about their struggles. We are separated by borders or by language, but we live under the systems that brought millions of Africans to this hemisphere. And inevitably, having that history, we live under oppression. And our efforts to fight against it cannot succeed if we're in isolation from one another. We are fighting against some of the same forces. My late mentor and friend, Glenn Ford, one of the co-founders of Black Agenda Report, he used to say Brazil was the US doppelganger. And so we all struggle with many of the same things. And I know some of you are going to Washington, and I would just say, tell it like it is, as the old saying goes, keep them honest. Our representatives are only as good as the demands that we make upon them, as I'm sure you know. And as for the UN, I was surprised the other day when I attended the forum session and there was no Portuguese interpretation. I couldn't believe it. And I hope that's something that they fixed, but I think it's an indicator of how we can be disregarded if we do not struggle. So I thank you all for being here. I thank People's Forum and our hosts, and so we are ready to go. All our guests are here? Yes, okay. So first, now I understand that their bios will be on the screen, so I'm not going to read them. Maria Malcher. Just have, I think, everyone come up together. I'll just go in order. I think we should all be up here together. Ingrid Farias. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the rules of Portuguese pronunciation, so please forgive me for messing up people's name. Priscilla Sarah. No problem. Okay, good. Nayara Lete. Gilmara Cunha. And Monica Sacramento. So each of our guests has 5 minutes of remarks, and we really do have to, we do have a lot of people speaking, and we need to really stick within that time. We will we'll give you a little warning or something when, as you approach 5 minutes. So let's just begin in that order. So Maria, yes, there's her bio. There it is. It's right up there. So I'm not going to read it. You can see it for yourselves. And Maria Malcher.
Boa. Vou tentar falar pouco com passado para a tradução para algumas pessoas.
I'm going to try and talk about our tradition. My name is Maria Melcher. I was born in the state of Pará, in the Amazon region, and we have a Center for Studies and Defense of Pará. This organization works in different fronts regarding the racism at the local and national level. We are 80 associations, members, and culture, and we use culture as an instrument of fight against racism. In August, we will be in existence for 43 years, but we are here also to talk about our work within that Black Alliance. I am a teacher in the Amazon. I teach geography, and I work with organizations of women groups, especially Quilombola women in the state of Pará. As we think about actions across our territory, and as we organize ourselves to fight against racism, we are inspired by recent events. We have public safety in the state of committee in the state of Pará. We participate in the process of having a plan for the defense of these groups of Brazilians. So we have the goal of having policies for these African descendant populations. We have worked in different initiatives against violence to denounce the relationship between the structural racism and the slow speed of recognition of the Quilombola people in terms of the territory and space. Our municipalities are in the number of 44. Not even 30% of the land is legalized. We have the land, but it's not legal. And we face expropriation and also manipulation in terms of the offers that the mining companies are making to persuade people. There are also European, in addition to American big companies. So all this violence is reflected in the murders that we have seen in our territory. In the Amazon, we have 80% of urban areas. The majority of the Black people in the Amazon are living in the peri-urban areas, like in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo. These areas are called favelas. And our rights are violated both by law enforcement and the lack of health care and lack of stimulation in terms of the education system. So the education is something that needs to be worked on since the beginning of basic school. We have to work against racism. Our participation in this group is important because we are part of this coalition or articulation, whatever we want to call it. We have an alliance. So it's organizations within the Brazilian state that fight against the state violence in Brazil. If the laws against discrimination would be applied. We have several resolutions. We have the law for, if you had the law for equality, we wouldn't be in this situation. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to share our thoughts. That is very important for our struggle.
Thank you so much. I realized I have this little sign that says wrap up, but it's in English. So when you see this sign, it means you should finish. I don't know what it should say in Portuguese. Our next speaker is our next speaker is Ingrid Farias. I'm assuming her bio is on the screen. Okay, great. Ingrid.
Oh, she didn't recognize me from the photo. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, actually. The sun is still out, but we think it's still afternoon. Good evening for everyone who's here together with us. It is an honor to be here in this space that's so beautiful, that promotes and stimulates aesthetic of our presence and an aesthetics of how we communicate what we're doing. So thank you and congratulations for this space and how you've been welcoming us. I am Ingrid Farias. I am a woman from the northeast of Brazil. I am from Pernambuco, which is in the northeast of Brazil. I am part of the Rede. And this organization unites trans and LGBTQI women in the fight against drugs and in Brazil and in Latin America more broadly. We have a project that goes much beyond the fight for new politics of drugs, but a project that speaks about peace. Our politics about drugs is about, has been used as a tool to kill and incarcerate people and people who have been criminalized over the years. And this policy against drugs is a re-edition of the politics of slavery and control of our population. So for us, this fight that we have kind of and our solidarity against with other people in Latin America is a project for peace, so that we guarantee this context of peace for territories, for countries, and so that we can have peace, we must be in alliance with radical movements, with our own posture and the way we see, for example, the fight against the prisonal system in Brazil, against police violence in Brazil. So we must have a view of the project that we want that will substitute this violence that is perpetrated by the state. And we must have a project for public safety that does not kill and harm our populations. The context of exploration, such as AIDS, and these politics of exploration of people who are in the streets, all of these policies are part of this broader project to clean up the cities and we are the answer to these problems that we have kind of raised of violence against people and the fight against drugs. And as said by the person who was the vice president of this space, the women have been the main protagonists against these violences that have happened in various parts of the world. So this struggle for peace, for a new policy around drugs, is a project for democracy that is just and that is for all of Latin America, and that will arrive and that will contemplate Black women, and that must be be part of a fight for the right to life and for the bem viver. So in a context of democracy, we must also have peace for policies that are that are abolitionists and that are not about controlling the bodies of women, Black women, of indigenous women and poor women in this country and in various countries of the world. In Brazil, we have a series of violations of women, particularly those who use drugs, who have their children taken away from them during hospitals, and there's been processes of cleaning up. And of sterilizing people and sterilizing women without their consent. And these projects are part of a logic of control and part of a logic of always saying how the bodies of Black women should be behaving. So it's essential for us that Black women who are capable of indigenous women, it's the prostitutes. We are the women who are radical, who have the condition to bring about transformations that we want, and we're here to speak for us, and we will not allow for people to speak in our name.
Muito obrigada. Nossa próxima oradora. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priscila Serra. I represent the National Coalition against incarceration conditions. We're working with our former president, Dilma, and our movement wants to be visibility to people who are deprived of freedom, and we want to hear about things that they denounce and their opinions. In Brazil, we have the great mission to promote the incarceration. Most of the inmates are people who did not commit a heinous crime, and we see that the prison system is structured to make us real prisoners in our country. We recognize as here, after several visits we made that were very important, we realized that if we occupy those spaces where we can monitor what happens in terms of torture inside prisons, we cannot say that prisons go beyond the limitations or the limits of the jails in terms of prisons where they have a system, a semi-open system. People are harassed and they go back to a system that is closed to them. So the programs for the incarceration system, 90% of the people inside the prisons are Black, and they are being classified as maroon or mixed race people. So regarding the war against drugs, that is just a reason to make us even more prisoners. It's a modern version of the slave ships. We are in those groups of black, cis persons, and so forth, where we suffer violence, we suffer within those prisons, and our alliance mobilizes groups so that we can monitor what happens inside the prison spaces and to see the psychological violence that the families of the prisoners are going through. The number of incarcerated people should be extended to the members of their families, because the prison is extended to those people, to the mothers and so forth. So we cannot consider prisoners just people who are within the prisons. We need to enforce laws to monitor, and we have committees, groups that monitor or have the oversight of the prison systems. And it's unimaginable the suffering that goes on inside those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Nayara Leite.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Nayara Leite. I am a militant of the Black Women in Brazil and an organization that it's called IMNB, which is an articulation of Black women in Brazil. And we have been around for 20 years, and we were started based on a process of mobilizing the conference in Durban in 2003. And we are joining together and doing policies in 5 regions of Brazil. And we joined together 50 different organizations in Brazil that are doing a series of different work and agendas against racism in Brazil. And we wanted to thank the space. As the other women were talking, I was thinking that this is the 3rd time that I come here, that I'm here at the People's Forum. And the first time I came here at the People's Forum was an activity that women in Brazil did for denouncing the killing of Marielle Franco, who was, and this agenda is still very complex and a challenge. And how can we think about other strategies that can actually protect the rights of women who are representing Brazil and that are here defending the rights of and that are fighting against violence in Brazil and that are denouncing racism in Brazil. And so I was thinking how I can speak beyond just my project. Our agenda is also about listening and about producing knowledge and giving visibility internationally of the violations of human rights of women, Black women. And I am very happy to be here. I wish I could come here to be talking about something different about Black women in Brazil. I wish I could be talking about something different, but it's still a long process for us to be able to get there. And there's still a lot more for us to do. And the and women and Black women in Brazil have not been silenced in any sort of agenda in any part of Brazil. And from women are fighting against the most important things like the lack of water to those of like visibility and national visibility in the country. It's an endless and tireless struggle. And in 2015, we did a huge provocation for Brazilians, and we did a march of 15,000 women in Brazil to denounce racism. And we are still in movement. We are still articulating. We are constantly doing movements, but this is not enough to promote the right and the changes and the radical change in the lives of Black women in Brazil. And to come back to the United States during the moment of the forum is historic, is important, but it also brings to us people, Black women, and people fighting against racism that reaffirm the importance of fighting against racism in Brazil. And when we talk about fighting against racism in the world, we are speaking of how there will not be life, there will be not dreams, there will not be better days, there will not be any changes. There will not be any changes in cultures if we do not incorporate the fight against racism. And for this, we must hear the experiences of Brazil. And it's very important for us to hear such a huge group of organizations so that maybe the history of Brazil, we can show how we have overcome a series of limits of what it means to have lived for over 400 years under slavery. And so this forum and this moment also makes us think about, in terms of Black women in Brazil, to build an alliance and to challenge us to build an alliance. What we think we do in Brazil will have to happen in the rest of the world. And what is going on in Brazil must be seen by the rest of the world. And it's very strange when we arrive at this moment, 20 years after Durban, and we still are fighting that we are listened to. Because no one listens to Latin America, and there is no listening of Brazilians. And the activists and Black activists that are going to these forums are not going to be listened to because there's no translation. And we still have to fight over this. And we still have to think about how we have to fight about this when Brazil is the biggest diaspora of Black people in the world. And so it's in this dimension of building alliances that we must think of this challenge of this forum, and we must think of the challenges of our time, but that we can also, based on these activities, based on these conversations that are at a global level, strengthen our work so that we can actually aquilombar in a global level, so that because the challenges are not easy, but in an alliance, in a quilombamento that is global, this perspective might be more interesting, and we might actually see something different that could happen and might challenge us to be more radical in our unification of the world. And so this is what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. And I wanted to thank the women that they are tireless and that they tell their story over and over and over again. And we are here to say that we are not going to stop, and we are not going to, we have chosen not to die, so we are going to keep going. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Gilmara Santos da Cunha.
After Nayara, we think about certain things in certain communities, for instance, where Marielle came from. In those communities, we think about education, and we are convinced that only through education can we change the world. And Mayara was talking about coming back here after several years. After we, women travestites are fighting to gain our identity. That's something that we have to call attention to. Why is it that this group is unable to participate in these discussion groups? Are we seen only from the point of view of their sexual sexual identity. We talk about the identification, gentrification of our Black population, but that has always happened. To be here today is to rethink what is this kind of movement that we are rebuilding if we are not empathetic towards those questions. If you think about the murders that happen in the slums in Brazil and the transsexual people who are murdered, you see that Brazil is one of the countries that murders people in these groups. We have to think about the methodologies used in those spaces, because our incidents, the incidents that happen to people like us are not reported to police. We have a considerable number of LGBT people, but that doesn't apply. The protection of those groups is not for me who are an inhabitant of the slums. So the travestites, the Black travestites in Brazil should be able to mobilize themselves and to use strategies for their survival, and then to think about how they can report those crimes that happen in Brazil. When I live in a favela, I cannot report about cases of discrimination within the favela. Who's going to protect my life? The police, the law enforcement agents? No, because we have police violence that happens on a daily basis. We are always struggling for our survival in those spaces. The policy for the favelas is a genocide, a policy of genocide. We have Black women and men who are the real victims, and people are not aware that there is need to mobilize and think about what happened to those 27 people, those bodies that were murdered. And when someone speaks up about that, they are applauded. We have to think about the movements that are being built. But I am talking about the community that is not aware of everything that is going on. So we need to do work on campaigns, awareness campaigns, every single day. Violence is not only of a structural nature. There are other markers that prevent this group are part of a dignifying individual. We suffer violence and brutality. We never see an image of a transvestite as someone who can embark on actions to contribute to the presence of that population in forums, fora like this one. We are behind in Brazil. So every day we have to struggle in order to assert our existence. And in my head, several thoughts run about the violence that I was a victim from, and I have to go through this process so that people in general have to look at transvestites with respect. When we want to be human, we have to struggle, and capitalism is a big factor, but you know, people, capitalism moves people, moves the world. We don't even give the time of day to someone who a beggar in the street. We only judge those people. We have to think about humanity. that we want to build, and we need to think that we need to build this strategy for survival and for society at large. And society is a plural notion, and it needs to be diversified. There's not one norm or a model for a transvestite or a man. We live in constant transformation. My role here is to talk about this project and this struggle that we see in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. In addition to that, we need to make people aware that we need to break that bubble of security. We need to look at the lives of other people. We have to have empathy. We have to care about other people. We have been talking about mental health. That's something that we have to reflect upon. So, I would like to close with a phrase that I always bring up in the beginning of my life as an activist. There are policies that don't benefit me. We have to look at different actions, include there should be conflict mediation and things like that to ensure our existence. There are people who reach place and other people who cannot do that. At some point, I realized that our reality was not what it should be for a human being. There's a tendency to give categories to everyone. They ask me, are you a trans person? And I say, no, I am a woman. So we need to adopt certain positions and rethink about things. It is very good to be here and talk to all of you, because in the reality in Brazil is very different from this one to be part of a panel. So a person like me probably is sleeping or selling pastries or hidden somewhere. So we are at the margin of society. Obrigada.
Obrigada a fazer coisas, a se submeter em coisas que cotidianamente a gente não gostaria de submeter. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much. And our last person to give remarks, Monica Pereira del Sacramento.
Good evening. Okay, now it's working. Good evening. I'm Monica. I am of an organization in Rio de Janeiro called Criolo, and it's been around for 30 years, and we have a commitment to persevere with women and young girls who are Black. And we have noticed in this panel that this is the public that is most affected by racism and patriarchy in Brazil. And so first I wanted to thank everyone for being here, and why I am here is because of the organizations that are here and how the organizations here that can inspire and bring about new relationships that are less violence, that are more careful, that are more loving and worried about everybody, not just about Black women, but all people who exist in this world and that are present here. And so one of the things that realize and becomes evident in this table is that Brazil is a country of the still. We still don't have the rights. We still don't have democracy. We still don't have the conditions to give people a right to life, and life to their children. And how beautiful this child is, and this country of the still, and that we are coming together and trying to transform. And in the case of Crioula and all of its areas of work, in Aliança Negra specifically, we think about institutional racism that is evident in the police forces and in the social justice system. And we must consider, as everyone else has already spoken a bit, about the massive number of people who are incarcerated, about the number of women that are brutalized by the police violence, about the massive number of women who lose their rights, and for this reason they are affected and also affect their communities. So it's their own health and their mental health and their being viver, but also that of the community. And even though we have suffered all this, we still wake up and we fight. And even in a country of the still, we still work for and daily fight to live in a more just world that is more dignified, that is a world that we can have a collective agreement that is different, that is not one of exclusionary of Black people. And so this alliance and this combination of different organizations must also come with their own trajectories, but also work together collectively, because it is collectively in aquilombamento that we are going to have the possibility to actually create change, and that we are actually going to be stronger. And so I wanted to say that in addition, I am afraid of the wrap-up. So just tell me, don't scare me. I'm a little shaken. I wanted to say that our role here, not just ours as organizations that are doing this type of travel and that are doing daily and working daily, that don't sleep and that go around New York City all day long without sleeping, taking pictures, solving problems. But we are here because we believe in the possibility of a future without racism. We believe in the possibility of making people having better conditions of life, of people having the chance of thinking about life, not just death. And this is why we are here. And we want to think about the life that we want to have, because we are already in death. So thank you very much, that we may have a good conversation now. Thank you.
I think everyone spoke now. Yes. Thank you.
Então, creio que já todos falaram. Muito obrigado pelas palavras de todas. Foram muito
we want to spend some time now in engaging in conversation. So you've all spoken on different topics, so I'll try to ask questions that are broad, so that everyone can participate. My first question is about the issue of democracy. In this country, we're told constantly we live in a democracy. We get to vote. We have representatives, supposedly, but who don't represent us. And I suspect the same thing happens in your country as well. How do you work in a country that calls itself a democracy, but especially when it comes to the lives of Black people, is not? Would someone like to speak to that issue, to the lack of democracy despite the claims of being in a democracy? Or rather, I would put it this way, electoral politics. We're told things will change if there's a certain person in office. And we were told all we need is for Trump to leave office. Trump is gone, everything's better. I suspect it may have had the same thing happen in your country. So you have a new old president, as I refer to Mr. Lula da Silva, past president back in office. And I'm sure there were hopes for change. Is there hope for change? Is that hope realized when you have someone new in office? Yes, anyone can answer. Yes. Yes.
Se eu entendi bem a pergunta,
If I understood the question,
eu acho que
I believe
ainda que a gente pense
that
democracia
even if
como
we think in terms
modelo
of democracy or of the idea of democracy as a model of state management, I think that we still face racism, and racism is the antithesis of democracy here and in any place. Democracy will not happen if on the part of the state and the social civil society actions for education about racism. I would like to underscore that both in this country and in our country with Bolsonaro, we went through a political crisis. We saw totalitarianism, we see totalitarianism and fascism, and with that comes white supremacy. We are faced with a world crisis. We have to pay attention. Here in the United States, in Hungary, in Italy, we see that there is increase in those totalitarian postures. So there are national states that hold on to racial processes, and that reflects on the lives of the populations. And we see that progressive states are still white. How to organize a process, elections are one of the pillars of democracy and political participation. But to build up a democratic process, only 2% of black women are represented in government. Gilmara, I don't have the exact numbers, but Gilmara probably can talk more about that. Now, and recently, trans women have access to the political process. So the reality is that there is plurality. We need to think or look at those pillars that supposedly are part of democratic processes, but they are not real.
Does anyone else want to respond to that question?
Alguém quer responder a essas observações, a essa questão? Firstly, I would like to you for the challenge that we gave to us to think about. We have to think about the concept of what democracy can bring us in terms of rights. Recently, we had a document that states that when there are no rights, there's no democracy. The agencies that we are building or creating, we won't be able to reach that level, that democratic feeling or
né, a nossa responsabilidade com as companheiras travestis, com as mulheres trans, nós não estaremos concluindo esse processo democrático no nosso país, na América Latina e no mundo. Então, o que a gente tem tentado falar é que a agenda aqui da Gilmara, que a agenda de Giovana, que a agenda que as nossas companheiras têm trazido para cá nos Estados Unidos, é uma agenda nossa. Que a agenda de polícia de drogas, que Priscila, que, né, o encarceramento e tal, não é uma agenda nossa, é uma agenda de todas as organizações trans. Então, o que a gente tem disputado hoje no contexto democrático é como a democracia dá conta dessas agendas, não apenas no nosso lugar, no lugar onde a gente questiona a democracia. Então, eu questiono a democracia como uma mulher negra, nordestina, mãe, mas eu não posso aceitar que a democracia, quando ela estiver completa para mim, ela vai estar completa para outras pessoas. Então é disso que a gente está falando. É esse conceito democrático que a gente quer disputar e que a gente sabe que hoje está em crise no Brasil, aqui nos Estados Unidos, na América Latina e em vários países do mundo. Então quando a gente fala, por exemplo, de Marielle Franco, de representação política, de participação política, a gente está dizendo que a gente tem cada vez mais se debruçado por esse campo, porque a gente tem percebido que só debater as nossas agendas entre nós não tem feito avançar um projeto democrático real que muda a estrutura do Estado brasileiro para reconhecer quais são as reais necessidades da nossa diversidade que está na Constituição. Né? Então, a gente tem dito aqui que a minha agenda, a agenda da qual eu me constituí como uma mulher ativista, feminista, negra, foi a agenda do campo da segurança pública. Essa não é mais só a minha agenda. A minha agenda são todas as políticas que foram dadas pela Maria em relação à educação, nos territórios, das pessoas quilombolas, das mulheres trans, das mulheres indígenas. Então, essas são as agendas que a gente precisa integralizar como nossas para que a gente consiga garantir uma democracia plena. Porque enquanto a democracia só for para um determinado grupo social, e como a bem Mônica falou, é um grupo bastante branco, bastante privilegiado, que já tem essa totalidade, nós não conseguiremos instalar uma democracia plena e real no nosso país.
White women and so forth. Talked about all these issues here, and that's very important to find responses to those problems.
A gente acredita na construção da democracia, porque ao enfrentar o racismo, a gente acredita que estamos construindo a democracia, sobretudo uma democracia plurirracial, porque não é normal a gente entrar em determinados espaços do governo brasileiro, como a ação permanente que estivemos ontem no Brasil, e ver que os chefes daquele departamento, 99% eram homens e 1% mulher,
women and white women, and there's not one. We can't even imagine having black women in these spaces, and this is something we have to build together. And our rights are violated from the space of representation. We are not in these spaces. Black women are not in these spaces. And in addition, when we think of the representation of identities, but the representation of regional spaces, we have very little women from the Amazon in the legislative in Brazil, and this is a problem. And we have very few black women in the biggest combination, in the larger area of judiciary in Brazil. And this has a repercussion that, so in 2023, we have to support judicial women who are working in the judiciary, and we have to try to get a woman in the judiciary in 2023. So this democracy exists, but it's still being built, and it only has meaning if it is pluriracial. Muito obrigada, muito obrigada. Eu só tenho minuto?
Okay, so the time is flying. So I am going to ask, there's so many things. Several of you have mentioned the issue of incarceration and Black people being incarcerated, which is a problem here. And I always point out that the United States has the biggest prison system in the world, with a greater percentage of its population, 2 million people, half of them Black, incarcerated. And as in your country, a war on drugs was given as the reason, but as you pointed out, it's often people who've committed minor offenses who are locked away in prison, and it is a form of modern day slavery. So we only have a minute, so it's a bit unfair for me to ask this question, but how do you all work with this history, the history of slavery, which inevitably ends up with the incarceration system punishing Black people the most? So having asked that big question and then saying you have to finish in a minute or two, can anyone speak to that issue of dealing with that history and how it impacts you today?
Ok, pode ser 3, vai lá. They only give me the challenging tasks. The problem of mass incarceration is very hard, and it's very hard for people to accept this as a challenge and a problem, because they use media to criminalize us. And at all moments, it's particularly people who are incarcerated and their families. So there's a broader community I'm speaking about, not just people incarcerated, but their families. So how can we talk about our rights if not by inserting ourselves into governance and trying to create legislation that talks about how being a family member of someone who is incarcerated does not mean a crime for us, and that the war against drugs is actually an agenda to incarcerate us all, not an agenda that's against drugs. So it's very hard to fight against drugs, but it's very important for us to fight against this. And for me, and what's most important, and what I've been learning from all the other women here in this panel, is that we must talk about the people who are incarcerated, about the reality of people that are incarcerated, about what's happening when we are trying to visit them and waiting in line, and who are the people who are waiting in line to visit their family members? Who are these women? Why are these things happening in the prison system? Why are they privatizing institutions? They are privatizing the lives of people, and these are people who are there to be re-socialized, but what we are seeing is the dehumanization of Black people that are from the periphery. Thank you.
Thank you.
There, I did it in 1 minute. Muito obrigada.
You did that in very well.
Você fez muito bem.
Very well in a short period of time. So it's time for our break, and I want to thank all of you for your wonderful remarks and your interactions. Thank you. Thank you again.
Woo! Aplauso para los camaradas. All right. So before we go on break, we actually have some amazing guests that are with us in the house. We have Maria Luisa Mendonça from the Network for Justice and Human Rights in Brazil. Aplauso. We have Tania Cipriano from the Brazil, who's a Brazilian filmmaker in the house. We have Andresa Jorge from Vieiras de Mare in the house. And we have our comrades from the Popular Committee of Struggle of Brazilians in the New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania area in the house. Let's give a round of applause. All right, comrades. So we will take a 10-minute break. So it is 6:40 right now. We're going to come back at 6:50. But when you hear my voice, be back and ready for another panel. Sound good? All right. You have 10 minutes. All right, folks, we're going to get started in about 3 minutes. 3 minutos. All right, comrades. All right, let us grab a seat and prepare for the second panel. But before we begin, let's start with a chant.
Mas antes de começar, a gente vai fazer canto.
All right, you ready? We have to do it together. 3, 2, 1. O povo unido jamais será vencido. 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 Woo! All right, let's grab a seat.
Ok, por favor, sentem-se. Nós vamos começar a transmissão também na segunda parte.
Falta.
As gays, as bi, as trans, as sapatão, tá tudo organizada para fazer revolução.
Okay, one more time, trans.
As bi,
As gays, as bi, as trans, as sapatão, tá tudo organizada para fazer revolução.
Outra vez.
As bi, as trans, as sapatão.
Ready? Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Hola. Tudo bem? Tudo bem? Tudo bem? Tudo bem? Perfect. Tudo bem. All right. All right, everyone. Welcome to our second panel, Actions to End Race and Gender-Based Violence. We have a really amazing panel discussion today, and it's especially very important because Black women in Brazil are predominantly the victims of intra and extrafamilial violence. In Brazil, 7 in 10 femicides are of Black women, and for the 6th year in a row, trans people, especially Black trans women, are the most likely to be murdered. Now, under Lula's government, popularly elected president, progress is being made to reverse the harmful effects of Bolsonaro's policies, ones which cut the budget for fighting violence against women by 90%. This administration, in combination with a lot of the organizations that are represented today, is committed to combating racism and gender-based violence, and is committed to supporting organizations who are pushing forward social change. So I'm very honored to have our comrades here who are at the front lines of the struggle against race and gender violence, comrades who are supporting our young Black women and girls, who are supporting our comrades who are sex workers, who are supporting our trans comrades here to join us today. So I'm excited to welcome Maria Aparecida, also known as Cida Vieira. Where is she? Is she here now? Aparecida, yes. Cida. All right. Silvana Verissimo. Perfect. Amanda Brito. Un aplauso. Evelyn Marcus. Oh, wait, go to this side. Switch. Which one? And Giovanna Cardoso. We'll begin with Cida.
Boa noite a todas, a todos e a todos.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. And we are very grateful to be here. At this panel. And the voice that you are hearing is not from a normal person, in quotes, it's a prostitute. Today, June 2nd, is the day dedicated to the fight against violence and exclusion. The world today is telling everyone this day. In Brazil, all the organizations who struggle to support the prostitutes. I chose to be in this profession because I like fetishes. I left my career as a lawyer, and I am doing what I like to do, not what other people want me to do. I am a Black person, and I was working in the street. Several women were victims of blackmail, and they would be violated, raped, and I had a brother at the time who was a member of the military, and I was working at the door of the barracks, and I saw with my eyes what was happening, and I don't lie. I am proud of saying what I want to say. I witnessed police agents doing blackmail with these women, and most of those women are married, and they have to do sex work, and they use that to blackmail them and to rape them. A great majority of those women are black, so we were in front of the barracks. My family comes from a military background, so I opened the door and our struggle continued. And my brother said, "She is my sister. We are doing some work," and this someone inside said that the laws could benefit us. I never was afraid of law enforcement, but some of my colleagues, my coworkers, are afraid because they don't realize they can be included in the society at large. So we have now a movement to protect prostitutes. We have legislation that gives us the right to work, but not the right to be protected. There are police officers and all of the branches of government and the military, councilmen, they want our votes when it comes to time to vote. With the Black Alliance, we are giving power to this movement, and we, the sex workers, are struggling, and there was one woman who said that she was not forced to perform sex because she wanted to do that, and so that woman is deprived of her clothes, and she stands there. So in the state of Minas Gerais, we have a council that works with immigration movements, and the prostitutes, when they go from one border to the other, they are punished. There are laws in every country, but in order for me to travel as a tourist, and I am forced to negate my profession, we want to be free of that. There's also racism. We want those people who kill us to go to jail. There are no statistics about that. There's no statistics regarding prostitute black women, not in anywhere in the government. We are considered as non-existent. So we encourage these women who need to work to provide their families with education, their children. She is a provider in her home, but she does not have rights. So just the fact that we are here is very good for us. I don't think anyone in this forest has ever heard a prostitute talking about these issues. We are fighting, and the Black Alliance is supporting us. So we are talking about women who are already working, who are already sex workers, but we do not accept in our group any person younger than 18 years old, because that would be a crime. So that's not prostitution. That is simply a question of something that needs to be eliminated. We have to denounce people who are using minors to practice illegal prostitution, because for us in Brazil, that is not prostitution. My name is Cida Vieira. I am a prostitute as an option, and I like what I do.
Luta de luta pela inclusão dos direitos humanos na nossa vida e contra a violência e violência racial.
We're fighting for human rights and against racism.
Thank you. Obrigada, Cida. Next, we have Silvana.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone who's present here. I am Silvana Verissimo, and I am here as the coordinator of the National Coalition of Women Fighting Against Violence Against Women. We are completing 20 years of existence, and we have just received financial support to give continuity to our work, and we are working against violence against Black women. Our project is directed to train 500 women who are defending the rights of the Black women and LGBTQ women and women who are living in rural communities, in favelas, and we respect the culture and the origin of everybody, and we do not discriminate against anyone, because we are Black women, and Black women must work together. Our enemy is racism that destroys us and tries to silence it every single day. Unfortunately, my country is the champion of killing Black people, which makes us reflect. We talked about this in the former table about democracy. There is no democracy for Black people in Brazil. There is no democracy for people like me that is Black, that walk into a supermarket and a security officer is against me all the time. There is no democracy for people like me that are Black, that when we enter an airplane and we are the first people to be taken off the airplane. There is no democracy for our country where people that are Black that are at risk of being killed within a supermarket just for going there to buy the food for their family. This is the reality of my country. I come from a family of militants, and I am from the interior of São Paulo, in a city that has 60% of its people that are Black. And we used to work in sugar, and my family used to work in sugar. I'm not sure if you understand what that means. And we know that in places that there was sugar, there was slavery. And my father always told me that you are a daughter and you are a woman that is Black, and you are going to get wherever you want. And I'm very thankful for my ancestry and for my parents for giving me this education. I am never going to bow down to anybody, because we are part of a country that is racist, and where there are white people, you are going to be there too. We are saying this daily to the people in our network. And this is the first time that our network is coordinated by someone who is from the interior. And in our country, the farther you are from the capital, the more perverse racism is. And some of the people who know very well the interior of Brazil know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a shame. One of the cities called São José do Rio Preto, until 1950, there was still slavery in this country, in this city. We are talking about 1950. This is 51 years, so this is very recent. This is the reality. And there's racism against people who are living in the interior because they believe that we are incapable, and that is the contrary. We are very much capable, and we are very knowledgeable of what happens and how our country is a country of exclusion. So I'm very happy to be here, to be talking to you guys. I am very happy to be in this space because I remember when my father would say, you are going to get somewhere and you are going, and here we are. And in our alliance, we also doing the work with other organizations that we did a seminar in Florianopolis, which is in the south of the country, with 3 other countries, with 3 other states, Santa Catarina, Rio Grande do Sul, and Paraná, and we did a job with other organizations in these states. And in 15 years that we've been working in this network, we are building and increasing this network because this network must be seen and the world must see what we are doing. And we are going to do another seminar that has the agenda of decarcerating the population that is in Brazil, and this is a theme that must come to the front. And we're going to be working with other organizations that work with trans women, and we have realized that if we want the Black Women Alliance to be an actual alliance, we must work together with trans women, and whoever works on their worm does not get anywhere. Our country is very racist, and all of the organizations must be united so that we can have the strength to fight against these racism. So thank you very much, and thank you for the patience of listening to me.
Obrigada, Silvana. Next, we have Amanda Brito.
Rito.
Oi. Boa noite a todas.
Good evening, everyone.
Sou Amanda Cássia, mais conhecida como Amanda Brito.
My name is Amanda Cássia.
Sou do estado do Pará, da Transamazônica Xingu, Amazônia.
I am from the
Sou filha da Mônica Brito,
region.
Né? A que deu a vida ao coletivo de mulheres negras Maria Maria, a qual eu estou aqui representando hoje. Eu não posso deixar de falar da fundadora, da pioneira da Transamazônica Xingu, que é a minha mãe, nesse momento importante. Eu fico emocionada.
I am moved right now because my mother suffered all kinds of violence in the Transamazônica
dar vez e voz às mulheres da floresta, das águas, da periferia, da cidade, do
from the forest, from the
o coletivo é
from
construído.
the rural
eu não
areas.
sabia que eu ia me emocionar tanto assim,
collective.
Sabe? Eu estava tão nervosa antes de entrar aqui, mas
I was feeling so nervous. But yeah, the excitement, the emotion took over my
a nossa luta é difícil, gente.
Our
né?
struggle is
Você
very
existir
difficult.
E resistir, lutar na Amazônia não é fácil, não.
Resist,
né? Eu sou de uma região que é dominada pelo latifundiário, né?
Easy,
que nos ameaça a tirar nossa vida dentro da nossa casa, né? Com uma bala na cabeça, tirar a vida das nossas famílias.
These people can
eu teve uma
kill us with a bullet.
Que eu tive que esconder mesmo. Eu tive que me esconder dentro da minha própria casa com a minha mãe para salvar a vida dela, porque eu pensava era nela.
I had to hide in my own house to save
o coletivo ele vem nesse enfrentamento, ele vem se fortalecendo.
This group, this collective
has been juntamente com o apoio da aliança mais ainda, né? Porque nunca deixamos de lutar pelas nossas e pelos nossos direitos e pelos nossos corpos, nunca. A aliança nos fortaleceu nessa luta, nos fortaleceu a entrar dentro da floresta, a falar com aquelas mulheres isoladas, nos fortaleceu a entrar dentro do quilombo, andar 3 dias, 3 noites na água, porque o Rio Xingu é a nossa rua, não é?
through
3 dias e 3 noites
water
para
streams
chegar no quilombo, para
for 3
chegar lá
days
naquela
and
mulher
3 nights
indígena isolada
to
também que
get
tem,
to the
para chegar lá naquela
Quilombo
mulher pescadora,
communities
ribeirinha,
and
beiradeira,
to
para dar
the
vez
women,
voz, para trazer
fishmongers
a voz dela
and
conosco.
and river
Deixar o
communities to talk
recado
to them.
que não queremos barragem
We
no nosso rio,
have
no
to
nosso território.
raise our voices against
Chega de destruir a Amazônia.
the destruction of
Chega de
Amazon, the
queimada,
building
chega de
of
destruição,
dams,
chega de desmatamento.
enough
Amazônia viva. Nós
forest
somos a
fires
Amazônia. A Amazônia é
and
feminista.
deforestation.
A Amazônia é
We
negra.
are the feminist Amazon, the black
Seguimos
Amazon.
juntas.
We
Eu sigo porque eu sei que eu
go
não estou
forward
só.
together. I know
Eu
that
sou a voz da
I
minha
am
mãe
not
hoje aqui,
alone.
porque ela me
I am the
está
voice of my
nesse
mother here
desafio.
today.
Eu sou a voz dela,
She
eu sou a voz da minha
encouraged
filha,
me
eu sou a voz dos meus
to
irmãos,
face
eu sou a
these
voz de
challenges.
todas as
I am
mulheres
the
que
voice
estão lá,
of
dentro
my
da floresta,
daughter, of
dentro
my
da cidade, dentro do
brothers,
campo,
of
em qualquer
the
lugar que
people
seja,
in
ali
those
dentro da Amazônia,
areas
no norte
inside
Pará,
the
da
Amazon.
Transamazônica Xingu.
From the
Seguimos por
Transamazônica
nós.
to Xingu, we
Seguimos por
continue
nós,
our
com
path,
esperança de um futuro com igualdade
hoping for
e
a
sem
future with
violência
equality and without
contra nossos
violence
corpos. Obrigada. E
with
desculpa,
our
gente, a emoção,
bodies.
porque
Thank you very much, and I apologize for being so emotional.
E aproveitando já o embalo, quem quiser seguir a rede do Comunema, Maria Maria no Instagram e no Facebook. Está lá todos os nossos trabalhos, gente. Obrigada.
Obrigada, Amanda.
Agora a gente vai ouvir da Evelyn.
Boa noite.
Good evening, everybody who's here. My name is Evelyn Marco. I am an indigenous person that is Afro-descendant, that is trans and non-binary from the Amazon. And just as my friend Amanda, I am from Pará, and today I was born in Belém, which is the capital of Pará, and I work today in the municipality of Bragança, which is the center of people who are called Caetés. And these are people who have developed on the margins of the river Caeté. And these are people who are seen differently from the way that geography is divided up in the country. So what we call Amazonia is very different from legal and illegal Amazonias. So there is a Brazil that is national, but we have an image of Brazil that is sold for everyone else. And then we have all of the Brazils that make up Brazil from within. And so when we talk about regions that are far away from urban centers, we are talking about regions that are extremely, that don't have justice, that don't have the help from, that are called land without law, and where white men who are rich that can work under colonialism, and they do whatever they do. They can commit crimes, they can kill, and they can tell who can be killed, and they know that they will not be punishment. And this is the territory we are talking about, and this is a territory that's so large. And I only can meet Amanda in panels like this one because we are in the same state, but we are very far from each other. And it's very hard for us to build coalitions because we are so far from each other. And these initiatives are really important because this is when we can come together. And as an alliance, we can join together all these activists, all these women in the struggle against violence against women and violence of gender that is made even worse by racism. And us that are women, we that are Black women, we have multiple layers of violence against us. And these are all made even worse by other markers of difference. In Bragança, where I am working as part of the Quilombo, I have learned that much of the information that is supposed to arrive in this area does not arrive. When we talk about information, we are also talking about education. And we are talking about education in Brazil. We are talking about a system that is underfunded, that there's a policy, as a strategy of governance not to educate people. If you go into rural communities, if you go into cities that are far from urban centers, and if you ask anybody, what is gender? What is race? What is ethnicity? A lot of these people, I can tell you this, these people do not have this conscience. They don't realize. This is why we have to talk about these things. We have to teach people about racism. We have to talk about, and we have to be talking about gender, about diversity, and about these issues in these territories, and fighting and the discourse of neo-fascist discourse that have been disseminated in the last few years in these governments, in these disgovernance of Bolsonaro, of Trump, that joined together in an international strategy that to fight against our human rights in all of the territories of Brazil, in all of the territories of the world. And so we bring these agenda to this table. We must realize that we still matter. The feminist agenda, still the queer agenda, that from here in the United States is, and when I go to the Amazon and when I go to the interior of Brazil, I see that the feminism, that the way that it's theorized, the queer theory, it does not contemplate the bodies that are female bodies and the trans bodies in the Amazon and in the interior of Brazil. So we are here also to strengthen this dialogue and to broaden these discussions. We must also develop in Brazil what it means to be Black, what is Black Brazil, because we have such a huge diversity in Brazil. And many of the theories, the way that they are put, are very rigid, which makes so that we don't identify with these theories. And so I grew up being told that I was not Black enough, that I was not indigenous, that I was supposed to be a man, that I was not woman enough. And so we must broaden these discussions and we must bring in them to education and tell people about this and bring science to traditional communities so that we can bring change to these areas. So in my city, every day there are jokes about violence against trans people. And so we must build an idea that there is humanity in the bodies of trans people.
Obrigada, Evelyn. Lastly, we have Giovanna.
I am a Black woman, a transvestite, and since '79, we started the movements for transvestites, and some people think that we just piggyback the other LGBTQ groups. We created the first institution or group of women of the night. And we have the Family Brazilian Institute. We have more than 6 million trans people in Brazil, and 72% of this population are Black trans persons. And where are them? In the prostitution work, in segregation, they are hidden. You don't see them in the big cities in Brazil. You don't see a trans Black person during the day, only at night in the spots where you see prostitution work, but because they don't have other opportunities. panel before talked about that one of the panel members talked about the possibility of trans people working in politics. So we are bothersome to them. So we irritate them because more than 30 people who are trans are council members since 2018. 5 of them were elected as representatives of the legislative, but none of them is able to legislate. There is not this opening. There was a representative from the state of Sergipe when she was a councilwoman. She submitted before she left the legislative aid amendments to the constitutional amendments in the municipality of Aracaju, but none of them was approved. And Duda Salvador, as a councilwoman in Belo Horizonte, introduced several bills, but none of them was approved, only now that she left the legislative body. But while she was there, her projects were not, her bills or proposals were not accepted. So we need to show the black transvestites in Brazil, from the hinterland of Brazil, who are in the favelas, who are segregated and are shut down. I'm not going to mention the name. There's a researcher who writes about them, but he is more homophobic or transvestite-phobic because they were, he said that we were boys who wore skirts. So that's the image that people have outside of Brazil in the United States. With more than 50 years of struggle, I am for the first time in New York. Many transvestites who were boys and men all of their lives, but then they transitioned and they didn't suffer the several indignities. Many of them went through that. So they were boys, they were young men. They studied and then they transitioned to their new sex, but 60% of our population did not have that privilege. Many of those people are not given any opportunity. Unfortunately, we have a movement, and I don't want to point the finger, but we have a movement that thinks about themselves only their corner. They don't talk about the Brazilian negritude. And all of that mess, the politics regarding the transvestites. When there is a demonstration, a march, we are in the front lines. In 75, the chiefs did not want any transvestite movement. There was our sister Liza Minnelli, who had some negative things, but she did a lot more than many other people. And the lesbians in the Northeast. We approved the T in the LGBT. So we had a movement in Curitiba, not because there was the barracks of GGT. We are Brazilian, we are Black, we are in all the corners of Brazil. She leaves the interior of Brazil, from São Paulo, but if she had the opportunities, she would not leave. So this is a Black Alliance, and this is, we utter the voice of Brazil. I lived in many places, but everything was organized. We, the transvestites, want to have a transvestized Brazil, and there are transvestites in all areas of the country. People love some of the things that the transvestites do, so we need to quit being hypocrites, and these people have to be respected because they are a taxpayer as well. I am a transvestite, I am Brazilian, and I will continue to fight. And I told you I am here now after 50 years of fighting, because other transvestites who transitioned are still around here. Well, they sometimes are in the closet, and they are not white, but they have a color of skin that is more acceptable. And those people have more opportunities because they are light-skinned. The ones who have real black skin did not even complete grade school. So we have to fight for inclusion, for skilled work, and all the women, Black LPPs from all over Brazil have to fight for that.
We have about 10 minutes for any questions. So folks, if you have questions, just raise your hand, please. We can take maybe 2 questions at once, and then we could pass it to our camaradas. Oh.
Perguntas?
Can I ask in English? Yes. Okay. This question is for Giovanna. I'm also Afro-Indigenous and I'm trans. Is it possible that any of the work that Black trans people, Indigenous people in the US intersects with what trans Black Indigenous people in Brazil are doing? Or is it completely separate? Can you speak on that? Can you speak on progress? And because from where I'm standing, I feel that somebody talked about data, there's more death in Brazil, and Brazil does have the second largest Black population outside of the US. So I don't feel safe here in the US. So the whole time you're speaking, I'm worried about you, and we're worried about what I feel like we both have privilege in a lot of ways, because you're standing up there, sitting up there, and I would never do that. So, yeah, and I have privilege of American, I'm American and things like that. So and you spoke about you want solidarity, you want transnational solidarity and things like that. So.
Eu vou responder. Mobilizado,
thinking
eu tenho
about
articulado,
and
eu tenho lutado.
Articulated and fought for, that is exactly for the intersection of, we talked about movements that are intersectionary. We say these things, but in practice, we see that that people do not have the basics, do not have the basic knowledge to be able to talk about intersection. I say this as a teacher who is who's working in public schools. And when I talk about identities that are LGBTQ, and when people arrive at B, they don't know what that means. And when they get at T, it's like they'll never understand. So when we talk about these things, and how are we going to talk about this with racism in Brazil? How are we going to talk about this with other forms of diversity, about territory? That's where indigenous rights are going to come in. And when people look at me and they say, there's too much to learn, there's too much. But this is why we must make these conversations broader, and this is part of an educational process. And what worries me most is how are these bodies going to have a chance to enter these conversations? And I am very privileged for being here today, because for me to be here today was part of a struggle within the Quilombo to approve the project within a financing organization that was interested in working in these issues. So we also had to be selected to have the projects approved. And when that association of people living in Quilombos approved this project, and they look for people to work in this project that talks about violence of gender and thinking about race as well. And I was the person that was selected specifically because how many people do we know that are trans and indigenous and Afro-descendant? I had the privilege that Giovanna's talking about. I only understood that I was trans when I was in college, when I started studying queer theory. That was the only moment that I understood everything that I suffered in my life as a child that was very effeminate. And that's when I understood that this was gender violence, because my feminine was always there, always in my body. And this is something that's colonial. The question of gender was brought in through colonial invasion. Our original people from this territory, from Amazonia, we always had a plurality of gender. And so here I am giving continuity to all of my ancestors. I am giving continuity to a struggle that is ancestral. Our territory, that is called Grão-Pará-Amazônia, of people who are called chimbiras. And these people are recognized for being feminine, and they were respected for being women. But they also had what the colonizer was saying was a male body. And so what we understand today as gender of female and male is actually a fiction that was brought into our territory. And this is so enforced that today we learned it really well, and everyone knows what this means, and everyone can say what is something that's for women and something for men, except when you go to our territory, this does not contemplate our bodies. And so it is not convenient for us to start discussing these things because this will cause a huge change in society, in everything that they understand as male, as female, in terms of race, in terms of ethnicity. And these were concepts that were built in the vision, in an epistemology that is European and that was imposed on our bodies. And this is why that I say that these discussions, they're much more complex. The whole is much deeper. And so when through a very, very difficult process, when I finally am able to finish middle school after suffering a lot of violence, and I'm also able to finish my college degree, and I can arrive at this place, at this table, and this opportunity are my ancestors saying that I am not alone. And this opportunity of alliances when I have these people beside me who are interested in hearing what I'm saying and saying that I'm not crazy, I really feel that I am a person. And this is to be in this place that I am a person took a really long time, and this is why I know this is important, and I know why it's important for me to be this. And I am so bothered when white people talk about indigenous rights, and I think I should be the one that should be there. And why am I not there? Because I am not white. And our country was built on this through colonization and invaded by white people. And so this is a power of white people, and this is what has united our people, because we are not white and we suffer from this supremacy. And these are the people in power, and these are the people creating laws, and they are the ones who are deciding which are opportunities we have. And just to be succinct, this is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Na verdade, não há segurança para a população trans, talvez, em nenhum país do mundo. Que nós tivemos.
In fact, there's no safety for any trans person in any country. We saw this also here in the United States. To have security, safety is a privilege. But we learned yesterday that there is a life expectancy of 30 years for a black trans person. The only difference regarding our country is that we are a social movement, but we denounce what happens. We denounce the abusers. We report when there is a crime, a transphobia crime here in the United States. The media reports that in Brazil. But when a black trans person who was set in fire 3 months ago in Bahia went into the emergency room still with the flames on her, the attendants, the staff of the hospital put her outside of the hospital. Today, or 20 days ago, the governor just ordered trans person who was part of the military to leave the military because she was deemed not to have the capacity to hold that position. One thing that has to be taken into account is that the trans black people who were murdered died because they are trans, but negritude is what is considered. So you are a black man, big black man, so you have to die. So we live in a country in Brazil where there is no racial democracy, there is segregation, the black bodies insist that they are in the senzala, the black quarters, but they are exploited. Their housing is at a subhuman level. They are hired from the northeast parts of the country to be maids, or someone said that the hope came with President Lula's return to power, but that's not completely true, because President Lula reestablished a policy from President Bolsonaro, reverting the policies regarding trans people. When you are faced with two kinds of suffering, you choose the one that is less, inflict less suffering. And the government says that it's not a left-leaning government, but a coalition.
Aplauso. Thank you. Obrigada to our comrades for reminding us of the role of working together and the role of education to fight our shared enemy. The enemy that causes violence to our trans communities, our indigenous communities, our women, our Black communities, all of our queer and trans communities. So thank you for reminding us of the role of working together and fighting our shared enemy and building democracy in the US, in Brazil, and building for a better future. So we are running short on time. We are going to have a 5-minute bathroom break, a very strict 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 7:47.
5 minutos, exatamente.
All right, comrades, let us get our seats. We're going to start again. Don't, but okay. All right, we also have some special guests in the building. Yeah, everyone's talking. David, like. Margaret. Vou ver agora. You forgot. I thought, oh my God. You were supposed to get some table. Aí eles vêm para cá também, que é uma experiência. All right. We have some special guests in the building. Let's un aplauso for Vanessa Nascimento, who's the executive director of Black Reference Institute in Medellin. We have Douglas Belcourt, the founder of UNEAFRO, here as well. Clélia Prestes from the AMA organization in Brazil. All right, in just a few minutes, we will start with our third panel, which is race-based anti-violence communications. We'll get started shortly. We also have Natalie Callisto from the Race and Inequality Organization in Washington, D.C. Ready? What's up? We're about 20 minutes behind, so I guess we'll start now. All right, so I'll.
So we have like 20 minutes roughly.
All right. So first we have our moderator, Margaret Kimberly. Woo! From the Black Agenda Report. All right. Next we have Nilsa Irasi. So I'd like to welcome Larissa Santiago. We have Vanda Meneses. And lastly, we have Alanay Reis. Wonderful. Once again, comrades, this is our third panel on race-based anti-violence communications, where we'll talk about contemporary and innovative ways of communication and the effect of Brazil's population. So with that, I will pass it over to Comrade Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Everybody ready? All right. Okay. I'm told the order is changing slightly. Larissa Santiago's first. Okay. All right. So before I get started, I want to make sure the bios are on the screen. Okay. Yes, we have Larissa Santiago. So with this, we're going to be slightly different on this panel, and I'm just going to ask questions of each of our panelists. So this panel is about race-based anti-violence communication. So I would like to ask Larissa Santiago if she can describe what she does. Just a brief description of her work.
Oi, boa noite. Estou me ouvindo? Boa noite, eu queria agradecer a oportunidade. Eu sou Larissa Santiago e eu queria dizer que é muito importante falar que eu sou do Nordeste do Brasil. Acho que
It's very important to mention that I am from the northeast of Brazil. Because we have an image of Brazil that is represented by Rio de Janeiro and mulatas and so forth. And part of my work in communication, which values diversity in Brazil. So we have to deconstruct the image of Brazil. When I stress that I am from Recife, I come from a different background in terms of social and economic aspects. So that's before I tell you about my work, I would like to say that communication in Brazil is dominated by a group of 5 families in Brazil of white and rich men from the southeast. They dominate what is said, what is shown internally in Brazil, but also what is broadcast to the world. So we receive news and we are influenced by culture such as the American culture. But our conversations that don't have an impact outside has to do with these families of white men. So my organization, an organization of Black young women across Brazil, which exists since 15 years, encourages Black women to talk about their lives. We started in 2013 in Brazil through blogs, so we call ourselves Black women bloggers. But with the development of technology and the reach and the transformation of technology through social networks and platforms, we started to use other means to encourage these women to tell their stories in different areas: health care, human rights, culture, art. Now the blogueiras negras, the Black bloggers, give visibility to Black women. There are two social movements. We spread concepts and actions to give visibility to Black women in Brazil, and as well as in Latin America, because we are part of a community of Latin American women, and we also include people from here, from the diaspora.
And Nilsa, what would you like for people to know most about?
Huge pleasure to be here in this space and to be welcomed into this space. And though I would like to be invited into this space to do other things that are not talking about the struggles and the problems of Black women in Brazil. And we are here for the occasion of when Marielle was assassinated. We were here with Benedita da Silva. And anyway, but this is our role. And I think to talk about my work, I must also talk about who we are, because we are talking about Black women, and who are these Black women? Black women in Brazil are not a minority in Brazil. We represent 6 million people in Brazil, of the Brazilian population. So we are talking about, in a Brazil that is a continental country, to talk about communication and to talk about Black women is to talk about a diversity that is incommensurable. I am executive coordinator of the Institute Mulher Negra, which is an organization, a feminist organization of Black women that has been around for 35 years, and we work in different fields. Thank you. And to talk about communication 35 years ago, when we talked about this organization, communication was in the heart of our organization. So we were always worried about working with communication as a human right, as a nexus for empowering people and organizations and women. And so the work that we do with the Alliance is a work that is very audacious, because we have lived the boom of technology and of bloggers and of all of these, all of the young people, what they're doing. There's a new generation coming around, and there's a new generation called tombamento in Brazil. And our worries is, what about the adult women, the women who do not have access to this knowledge, to these technologies? So we created within the Project Alliance a project called which is a word that combines inclusion and lab, and it has various dimensions. it deals with the question of religion, of Afro-religions, of the encruzilhadas, of Exu, which is the god of the crossroad, and the crossroad that the women find themselves in today. This is a project of training women in new technologies, and for as surprising as it may seem, we've been talking about these themes that are so fantastic, but when we are talking about women from community, vulnerable Black women who are still suffering from something that we call technophobia, the technology was not made for Black women that are adult, that are from communities. They are dependent on their sons, on someone younger to talk for them. And so our project is, and it's thanks to the audacity of this foundation to develop at this moment a project at this level. Thank you.
And next question is for Wanda Maria Menezes Barbosa.
A próxima pergunta é para Wanda Maria Barbosa.
And looking at your bio, it said you created the Association Cultural Zumbi, the first Black entity in the state of Alagoas. I know I mispronounced things, but can you explain what that organization does? Can you explain the work of that organization?
To be here with feminist friends and see many people who came here for the forum, the Afro-Descendant Forum. The Cultural Association Zumbi was the first entity in my state that researched on what is the meaning of being Black and the need to fight against police violence. And that happened because Black son, the son of a Black teacher who worked in a public school, but she taught many high-level politicians. He went to a party in a closed club with friends, and he was invited to get out because he was Black, and he was studying medicine and in the university, and he was with white colleagues and many. So his name was Marcelino Dantas, and because of what happened to him, Marcelino could not complete his medical degree, and Associação Zumbi was a mixed association. We did research on Serra da Barriga. We collected information about our patrimony in that area. So it was the first entity in the 70s and 80s. And since then, we continue to work on this work. We have the network of Black women in Alagoas who live in the periphery, prostitutes and transvestites, and homeless women in particular. And I am part of the Black Coalition for Rights, and me and my partner, René Santana.
entidades que fazem
we
parte da
have
coalizão.
280 organizations in our coalition. We started in 2019. Douglas is here. He is one of our founders. He started this coalition. Vanessa also is here. Many of our sisters who are part of our coalition, and they struggle or fight against all types of discrimination. We developed that work with the Parliament. We had an international meeting in 2019. We intervened in the Congress and at the international level. We worked with the United Nations, and we managed to contribute to the impeachment of Bolsonaro. And we conducted many actions regarding the rights of adolescents, and that without any funding. So we are part of the work that Elas Plus does, and we have a project with the goal to strengthen our communication. It is a great pleasure to be part of 16 projects and to do this exchange and include the Iracema Souza and Savannah project. And we are developing this work, and we bring our experience here to the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alana Texera-Rice.
Por último, Alana.
And I see you are a journalist. Do you work independently, or do you work for a media outlet?
Everyone that's here and present, my name is Alana. I am a journalist. As Margaret has introduced me, I work with communication and media, that is particularly Black and for women, and communication that is specifically targeted at human rights for Black women. And this is part of the organization that I am an activist in. And here I am representing the network of women that are Black in the Northeast. Thank you. And it's interesting to contextualize that many times that a lot of people have been talking about that we are from the Amazon, and we are talking about the Amazon, and it's important for us to contextualize to people here that are not Brazilians, that do not know Brazil. And Brazil, like the United States, is a huge country, just like the United States, with so many people. And we have a continental dimension in Latin America, and we are divided in 5 different regions. And the region with largest Black and Indigenous population are the regions of the Northeast, which is where I am part of, where Larissa and Wanda are from, and other people are here. And the region that is north is the region that's been talked about as being an indigenous area that is from the Amazon. And so it's important for us to talk about this so that you can understand how racism and sexism and its violences work in our country. We must understand how this works, how they work differently in each one of these regions. Each one of these regions that we've been talking about, particularly the one that I am speaking from the Northeast, is the region that unfortunately illustrates the worst indices of violence and of racism and violence of gender. And what I mean by this is that in the Northeast, in my state, which is in Bahia, and the state of Ceará, and in Pernambuco, these are states that where the index of violence where the index of police violence is enormous. And we have a huge challenge within Brazil to make these cases, which are horrible cases, which are cases that are inhuman, which are cases of police violence against children, of sexual violence, of feminicides, domestic violence, trans feminists, homicides. All of these realities are really bad in my region, and we have a huge challenge of going beyond our state in terms of denouncing these cases. What I mean is that it's very common for the dynamic of how Rio de Janeiro works and the way that organized crime happens in Brazil, that the data of violence in Rio de Janeiro are cases that are violence that become national. So we treat cases in Rio de Janeiro as if they were national cases, as if they were emblematic of the type of crimes that the state is committing. And we don't have the same type of reality and treatment of the cases that are happening in the Northeast and in the Amazon. And in addition to this reality of how Brazil is so diverse, and already talking about the issue of communication and the importance of the media talking about these cases and showing these cases, and so that people can be criminalized for the violences that they're they're causing. Something that we've been talking a lot about in this forum is about international solidarity, and we must understand and comprehend from this perspective how are we Brazilian activists, either here in Brazil or in the United States, and how are the activists that are Black, how are we going to think about relationships that are bilateral and that are solidarious and that are going to denounce these cases? Every time that there's a huge case of violence in the United States, and the Floyd case was emblematic of this, but we know that there are many other cases that happened in the last few years. Brazil adopts these cases. We feel a case of solidarity. We denounce these things that happen in the United States, and we need to think about the strategy so that the cases that are happening in Brazil, which is happening all over Brazil, and this is not an easy challenge, how are we going to think about, through communication and through solidarity that's international, how are we going to talk about these cases so that they may also be talked about in the United States, so that the American Black movement may also take on these cases, because we suffer from racism that is a global issue, and it's important that all of Brazil become solidarious with what happened within Brazil, but also that these go beyond the borders of Brazil, and so that other states also realize what's happening, and so that we can fight for the rights and criminalize people who are violating the rights of Black people in Brazil.
A few more minutes, so
agora a gente tem mais.
I don't want to punish anybody with a big question with just a little bit of time. So if would you all like to take, say, a minute each and just mention anything that you want that I didn't ask or you didn't get a chance to say?
I would like to mention something here as a Brazilian journalist. I would like to recognize the presence of Miriam and Miroca. So TV Globo, the biggest media outlet, every single time they come to our houses, raising their voices against violence. And so thank you for what you've done. The movement of Black women, in spite of all the negative aspects that were mentioned is the movement that showed more growth in the last decade. And it is also important to underscore that there was an exponential growth, but it brought to society a proposal of a new civilizatory model. So when we discuss feminism and black feminism, the feminists, black women feminists, show one particular aspect of what is discussed in terms of feminism. I think that's important, and reinforcing what Alani said, we bring our topics here, and the work that we do, the exchange we do with our American counterparts is important. We have trans people like Lana Barbosa, and we bring reciprocity, and we can rely on you in different moments because we have been fighting, and we really hope for this north-south reciprocity or cooperation. Obrigado. Só mais uns 2 minutos ou assim. Mais alguém tem algum comentário? I think that it is important that we tell you that the Black Coalition for Rights during the pandemic, in addition to the emergency assistance and vaccination. I don't know if you know that the first person who died from COVID was a black maid in Rio de Janeiro. So we managed to do important things. One of the things that we are proud about is that we conducted a campaign against hunger because our loved ones could not work, they were fired, we had to do something about that because they were vulnerable and unemployed. We conducted a campaign in March of 2021. We started with zero money. We only had our audacity to do something, but at the end of the year, we collected 24 million reais. Those funds, most of it, 40%, came from individuals who made donations from 10 reais to 40, 50 reais. We covered more than 100,000 families. So we were absolutely sure that there are allied partners, but we, in general, we think that we can only rely on ourselves, but this work showed that the importance of that campaign and should continue because after the pandemic, hunger continues. There were people who did all the logistical efforts, and this was a very successful campaign.
Hello, comrades. For this last answer, we have to adjust the stage a little bit. So for this one, can I ask you to stand at the front for the last part so we could move the table back for the next performance? Is that okay?
So we can still interact with you.
Yeah, so you can still interact. You can still ask a question for the next 2 or so minutes, but we just have to clear the seats, move the seats away. So if you could stand up and come stand to the front, that would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll still take questions. If you have questions, this is the moment to interact. We're just going to adjust the stage in the background. Questions, anyone? Yamir, yes?
Oi, boa noite. Well, I'm gonna say my question in English. Eu soy estudiante de Natalia. I guess my question is pertaining more to like patriarchy. I mean, this is a topic, you know, like Black Women Alliance fighting against violence. But I guess it's pertaining to us men of like, you know, we might be in the movement and support of feminism, but we as well as have internalized patriarchy that we have to deal with. So I guess like to you sisters, what is the best way for us to cure ourselves from this internalized patriarchy in order to, you know, be better for you sisters, you know what I mean? In support of y'all movement, you know, so we're not like hypocrites in the movement.
Thank you, Yamir.
Thank you for your question. Thank you very much. I'm going to answer what I tell my brothers that are Black men, and one is much young. Both of them are much younger than I am, but I am the oldest one. And my brother, who is a Pan-Africanist, and I tell him, you need to join the men. I can't tell you what to do. You've spent a lot of time supported by my mother and had my support. So now it's your turn to walk with your own two legs. So you must organize your own movement. Don't ask me what to do. Go and do it. So he is an amazing man because he looks at me and he sees me as a sister. He must first look at my mother and respect what she does and respect what I do, and then do what he has to do. So the first thing he must do is look around you, and then organize with other men and not ask us what to do, but you have the answer. Go ahead and do it. Thank you very much for the question. I'm also going to answer, still inspired by Nilza, what she was saying, who was talking about the movement of Black women in 2015, based on the idea of Niwa Bings, which is an activist who is part of the Black movement, who is here. The movement of Black women did a march of Black women against violence and for the Bem Viver in Brasília. And we believe that about 80 to 100,000 women were there, and we noticed how diverse the Black movement is, and our presence in all of Brazil, in all of the manifestations in Brazil. Something that called our attention is that there were no men. There were no men. Very few men are there marching with us. There were very few. And so from then on, we started reflecting on, and I started reflecting on, how do we talk about the issues that have relationship to men, such as the homicide of Black men. How can we talk? How can Black women who are leaders in this, but we don't have the solidarity of men to denounce these issues, and don't have the solidarity of men to denounce, for example, domestic violence? And we talk about this from the Black movement in general. Every time there's a huge case of sexual harassment and domestic violence, I don't know how it is here in the States, but the totems of Black men and who are Black activists, they don't do a single post on social media of those types of violence. In fact, they actually silence these issues, and they prefer to defend their friends, defend their cousin, defend their partner, who is also from the patriarch and who's also violent. And we know that the process of denouncement. And we know that when women stand up, other women will stand up too, and this is a threat to men. And so we must think about how men should be talking about these things. As women who are in communication, we are women that are devout of an Orisha called Ishu. We do not believe that the narratives are silenced, that narratives that are silenced have any possibility of change. We believe that narratives must be said, must be talked about, and we must notice that men are willing to talk about these narratives and bring them to the fore. Desculpa, gente, a gente vai precisar encerrar. Eu gostaria de agradecer ao nosso painel. Eu sei que é desafio dizer tudo o que vocês querem. É muito difícil ouvir de todas. Vocês foram muito pacientes. Eu agradeço muito.
Aplauso. All right.
An applause.
How's everyone feeling?
Como vocês estão se sentindo?
How is everyone feeling?
Como estão se sentindo?
Tudo bem?
Tá todo mundo bem?
All right. Perfect. Now we're very excited to welcome Samba de Carolinas to the stage.
Pra gente convidar o Samba das Carolinas.
But before that, we have a very special guest with us today. Aine Odara from the Agbara movement. Thank you so much for joining us. Aplauso. All right. Perfect. So now we have Sambas de Carolinas. We have Priscilla Santana on the flute, voice, and percussion. We have Gabriel Leite on the guitar. Fernanda Sicara on the cavino. And cavaquino. And we have Sofia Santana on the voice. Yes. And before we start.
So just before we start, I want to just first thank our moderators, Margaret Kimberly and Sadie Mosley. And we did not introduce Sadie at the beginning, but Sadie is the education coordinator here at the People's Forum. Sorry, I need glasses. She organizes political education through courses and public programming here. She's originally from Jamaica. She has previously worked on developing comprehensive sexual education programming within the Caribbean prior to joining the People's Forum. And inspired by radical Black feminist thought and popular education, Sadie is passionate about liberatory education and youth development. So thank you, Sadie. Thank you, Margaret, from the Black Agenda Report. And we want to give you this. And now to the band.
Thank you, Natalia, DDB. All right, let's pass it over to Sambas de Carolina.
Começa com qual? little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change's gonna come. Oh, yes it will. A change's gonna come. Oh, oh, yes it will. Oh, oh, yes it will. A change's gonna come. Then I go to my dear brother, and I say, brother, I'm down on my knees. He said, yeah, I can help you, and I'm down on my knees. But I know a change's gonna come. A change's gonna come. Oh, yes it will. A change's gonna come. A change's gonna come. A change. A change. I was born by the river. I was born in a little town, by the river. I know, I felt deep down that a change gonna come. Change gonna come. Change gonna
Although we are a Brazilian group, we wanted to start with this change is gonna come, Sankoc, so that we proclaim that change is gonna come. That's why we are here today, right? Because we want the change is gonna come. So, yeah. Eu vou ter que cantar com ela porque ela tá sem a letra agora.
Sou de Nanaioá, 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 sou de Nanaioá. Sou de Nanaioá, fui chamado de cordeiro, mas não sou cordeiro não. Preferi ficar calada que falar e levar não. O meu silêncio se calou, é a solidão que forçado passei. Meu coração, chorei as dores da escravidão, mas ganhei o teu vazio no coração. Sou de Nanaia, sou de Nanaia, sou de Nanaia, sou de Nanaia, sou de sou de Nanaia, sou de Nanaia, sou de Nanaia,
Viva Ticoães!
Ninguém ouviu samba de dor do canto do Brasil. Lamento triste sempre ecoou desde
você, meu amor. Vamos fazer uma Eita, ok. Isso, ok. Lá maior, lá maior. Bora de samba de roda. Cadê meu povo de Salvador? Vamos nessa. Baiana boa, gosta de samba, gosta na roda e diz que é bamba. Olha como aqui, olha que ela quer samba, ela gosta de samba, ela quer rebolar. Toca viola que ela quer samba, ela gosta de samba, ela quer rebolar. Ei, baiana, ei, baiana. Gosta de samba, gosta da roda e diz que é bamba. Baiana boa, gosta de samba, gosta da roda. É meu povo lindo aí atrás. E diz que é bamba. Olha, toca a viola que ela quer samba, ela gosta de samba, ela quer rebolar. Toca a viola que ela quer samba, ela gosta de samba, ela quer rebolar. Ei, baiana, ei. Thank you, everyone. We'll play now last song, because a gente tem que terminar agora, porque o lugar fechou. Mas antes de terminar, eu vou tocar uma pro pessoal de Salvador, porque eu sou de lá. Então a gente vai tocar um Ijexá pra gente. Hoje é sexta-feira, né? Então a gente vai tocar umazinha pra gente.
Eu vi mamãe Oxum na cachoeira, sentada na beira do rio. Eu vi mamãe Oxum na cachoeira, sentada na beira do rio. Colheiro, liro, liruê, colheiro, liro, liruá, colheiro, liro, sai de cá. Uma palavra de amor, um paladar. Memorial deve ser alguma coisa de lá. O sol, a lua, o céu de Oxalá. Comendo a gente, Emoripao. Só vocês, todo mundo parar aqui, só voz. Faltou o agogô aqui, né? Ipao, Morio. Volta a banda, Moripao. Thank you, everyone.
Nós somos o Samba das Carolinas, em homenagem a Carolina de Jesus, que tem um CD de samba lindíssimo. Então, a gente também coloca a Carolina de Jesus no nosso repertório e várias outras mulheres pretas que estão aí compondo e fazendo várias coisas na cena cultural. Obrigada, querida, pelo espaço. Obrigada, maravilhosas que estavam aqui mais cedo. Vocês arrasaram.